Get the hell out of my house, and go be the beggar you are, my mother-in-law screamed, her sharp nails digging into my arm as she dragged me onto the scorching asphalt that afternoon. For 3 years, I had been a slave, building my husband's fortune, and now I was being thrown away with nothing but a cheap plastic grocery bag. My tears hadn't even dried when a black luxury sedan purred to a stop directly in front of me. The tinted window slid down silently, and the man inside stared at me with an intense gaze before speaking. Before this story begins, please type in the comments where you're all watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so this channel can grow and bring you even more compelling stories. The sun was a merciless hammer in the sky, beating down on everything below. The asphalt in front of the opulent 2-story house shimmered, releasing waves of heat. But the blistering weather was nothing compared to the fire of betrayal burning in Sarah's chest. Get your feet off this property. Leave now. Go beg on the streets where you belong. Barbara's shrill voice shattered the quiet of the exclusive suburban neighborhood. The older woman's wrinkled but surprisingly strong hands gripped the collar of Sarah's worn-out t-shirt, yanking her mercilessly from the grand entryway, across the manicured lawn, and out onto the sidewalk, beyond the towering iron gate. Sarah stumbled, her bare feet landing on the sharp gravel at the edge of the driveway, making her wince in pain. She collapsed onto the dusty pavement, her right hand trembling as it clutched a small, white plastic bag. That was it. A single change of clothes, her diploma, and a thin wallet with a final $50 bill were all she had managed to save before being forcibly exiled. "Mom, please." Sarah's voice was a raw whisper, choked by tears that had already run dry. "Don't kick me out. What did I do wrong? What did you do wrong?" Barbara spat on the ground, her eyes flashing with a deep-seated hatred. "You're a parasite. A leech. Married to my son for 3 years and you can't even give me a grandchild. All you do is take up space and eat our food. Do you understand?" Sarah shook her head violently, the tears finally returning in a fresh torrent. She looked toward the shaded portico of the house. There, standing coolly in the shadows, was Jason, her husband. The man who had once promised to protect her for life now stood with his arms crossed, his gaze cold and condescending. Clinging to his side was a woman in a tight red dress and heavy makeup. Her name was Nicole. "Jason, please, help me," Sarah begged, her voice trembling as it cut through the heavy hot air. "How can you let them do this to me after everything I've done for your firm?" Jason scoffed. He wrapped an arm around Nicole's waist and sauntered toward the gate. Instead of helping, he threw her a look of disgust. "Everything you've done? What's that, exactly?" He laughed cynically. "You're just a wife who stays at home. I'm the one who hustles for projects, who gives the presentations to clients, Sarah. You just did a little typing and now you act like a hero. Get lost. Your presence makes this house feel dirty. Nicole is a much better fit as the lady of this house." Nicole smiled, a triumphant smirk, and leaned her head against Jason's chest. "Listen, lady, your husband doesn't need a charity case like you anymore. You should probably hurry up and leave. It's embarrassing for the neighbors." Sarah's chest felt like it had been crushed by a boulder. For 3 years, she had been treated like an unpaid servant, forced to pull all-nighters drafting architectural designs that were then claimed under her husband's name. And this was her reward? To be thrown out like trash. Barbara slammed the heavy iron gate shut, the sound echoing with finality, and locked it from the inside. "Don't you dare set foot in this house again. Go and die for all I care." Sarah bowed her head, her sobs breaking free. Her body trembled with a mixture of rage, pain, and utter despair. The heat of the asphalt began to burn the soles of her feet, while the sun baked her back. Cars drove by, some drivers casting pitying glances from a distance, but no one dared to approach. She had just forced herself to stand, wiping her dirty hands on her tear-stained cheeks, when the faint squeal of tires broke through the chaos in her mind. A gleaming black luxury sedan, a European model whose price tag Jason could never afford, had stopped right beside her. Its engine was a nearly silent hum. The passenger window glided down, releasing a blast of cold air that contrasted sharply with the oppressive heat outside. In the back seat sat a man in a perfectly tailored suit. His face was sharp, with a strong jawline, and his eyes assessed her with an intensity that was difficult to read. The man lowered his sunglasses slightly. "You're Sarah, aren't you?" His voice was deep and authoritative. Sarah was stunned. She took a step back, clutching the plastic bag to her chest. "Who are you?" The man didn't smile, but his gaze wasn't demeaning. "I'm the person who's been looking for the genius behind the brilliant designs your loser husband has been claiming as his own. Get in. The sun is too harsh for someone with your talent." Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the house. Jason, Barbara, and Nicole seemed frozen behind the gate, staring in disbelief at the expensive car that had stopped for her. The car door unlocked with a soft click. "Do you want to continue being their spectacle and die of heat stroke?" the man asked, gesturing toward the house with his chin. "Or do you want to come with me and take back what is rightfully yours?" Without a second thought, Sarah stepped into the car. The door closed, sealing her in a world of quiet luxury and blocking out the faint sound of Barbara's renewed shouting from behind the gate. The silence inside the car was deafening after the turmoil on the street. The scent of masculine cologne and rich leather filled her senses. Her body, which had been drenched in sweat, now shivered slightly in the cool air conditioning. She kept her head down, ashamed of her grimy clothes, staining the pristine seat of a car that clearly cost a fortune. "Here," the man said, offering her a cold bottle of mineral water and a clean, folded handkerchief. "Thank you," Sarah accepted them with a trembling hand. She sipped the water slowly, feeling the coolness flow down her parched throat. The car began to move, leaving Jason's neighborhood behind. Sarah gathered the courage to look at the man beside her. He was scrolling through a document on a tablet, appearing perfectly calm. Again, "Who are you, and how do you know my name?" she asked cautiously. The man turned off his tablet and faced her. "My name is Charles Sterling. I'm the CEO of a major property development and architectural group." Sarah's eyes widened. Charles Sterling. Who in the industry didn't know that name? He was the CEO of a corporate giant that always won massive billion-dollar contracts. His firm was the one Sarah secretly looked up to every time she created a design for Jason's small company. Last week, Charles began to explain, his voice calm and calculated. "Your ex-husband's firm, and I'm assuming he's your ex-husband, after what I just witnessed, bid on our mega resort project in Aspen." The design he presented was truly exceptional. Brilliant, full of life, with incredibly precise details and a high artistic value. Sarah was silent. She remembered that project vividly. She had spent 2 solid months on it, staying up until the early hours of the morning every single day to perfect the resort's design. "My board of directors and I were ready to sign a contract worth a fantastic sum with him," Charles continued. "But I have a habit of not trusting easily. I tested Jason during the presentation. About material efficiency, the structural load calculations for the main lobby's design, and the philosophy behind the curvature of its roof." Charles gave a slight, wry smile. Your husband stammered. He answered with standard, memorized arguments. There was no soul in it. He knew nothing about the design. Sarah's heart pounded. A surge of pride for her work, mixed with fury at how Jason had stolen it all. "So, I had my IT team examine the digital files he submitted," Charles said, leaning in slightly. "Your husband was foolish enough not to realize that in every file's properties, deep within the author and metadata, there was one name he hadn't managed to erase. The original creator's name, Sarah." "Sarah," she whispered, realizing her own oversight had become her salvation. "Exactly," Charles nodded. "From that moment, I had my people investigate you. I found out that for the past 3 years, Jason's nearly bankrupt architectural firm suddenly skyrocketed, and it all coincided with the date of your wedding, a coincidence too stupid to ignore." Tears streamed down her cheeks again, slowly this time. The fact that a stranger had seen her suffering and recognized her efforts made her defenses crumble. "I came to that house today to offer you a job," Charles said, leaning back and looking at her directly. "And I happened to be treated to some cheap drama at the gate. I don't care about your marital problems. What I care about is your talent. I'm offering you the position of head designer at my company. A salary triple the industry standard, a corporate penthouse apartment, and full security. Sarah was speechless. The offer sounded like a mirage in the middle of a desert. Why? Why would you go to all this trouble for a stranger like me? Because I value authentic work, and I despise seeing gold left to sink in the mud, because the fools around it don't recognize its worth, Charles answered firmly. You have two choices, Sarah. You can get out at the next bus stop and cry about your fate as a victim, or you can come with me. Prove your talent, and let your true work be the thing that destroys your ex-husband. Sarah looked into Charles's sharp eyes. There was no pity there, only a logical business proposition and an acknowledgement of her abilities, something that had been missing from her life for a very long time. She wiped her tears away fiercely with Charles's handkerchief. Her expression changed. Despair was slowly being replaced by a burning determination. I'm with you, Mr. Sterling. Outside, the dense cityscape of Chicago blurred past the dark-tinted windows. In the quiet of the car, speeding through the traffic, Sarah's mind was unwillingly thrown back to the grim days in that luxurious house that had been her hell. She closed her eyes and could instantly smell the stale coffee and dust of Jason's home office. She remembered the long nights when her spine felt like it would snap from sitting in front of a flickering computer screen that hurt her eyes. It would be 2 a.m., and Jason would be snoring loudly in their comfortable bed while Sarah had to revise a layout to meet a client's deadline. Every morning, before she could get any real rest, the sound of clanging pots from the kitchen would wake her. Barbara would scream from the dining room, "Sarah, do you think this is a hotel? It's 6 o'clock and you haven't started breakfast. What is your husband going to eat before he leaves for work?" Sarah would have to rush downstairs, cook, wash a mountain of dirty dishes, and then mop the impossibly large floors. When she asked for permission to hire a housekeeper with the money from her projects, Jason always had 1,000 excuses. Later, honey, the firm needs a cash injection right now. You're a good wife. Just think of it as a blessing to take care of your husband and mother-in-law. That's what Jason would always say, kissing her forehead with a manipulative smile that used to melt her heart. The memory of her own foolishness was sickening. Sarah would hand over every flash drive containing her designs, letting Jason present them as his own. She remained in the background, officially just a housewife in the eyes of Jason's and Barbara's friends, all to protect her husband's ego. But her sacrifice was never enough. Barbara began to terrorize her about having a child. The insults of being a barren woman became her daily breakfast. The breaking point had come 6 months ago. She remembered entering their bedroom one night to find a laptop charger and spotting Jason's credit card bill on the nightstand. There was a transaction for a diamond necklace worth tens of thousands of dollars. At first, Sarah smiled, thinking it was a surprise for their wedding anniversary, but the necklace never came to her. A few weeks later, she saw it sparkling around Nicole's neck, Jason's former classmate who had suddenly started visiting the house frequently for business reasons. Sarah had confronted Jason, demanding an explanation. Instead of feeling guilty, Jason exploded with rage. He flipped a table, smashed things, and accused Sarah of being blindly jealous and ungrateful. "Don't you start with me. The money used to buy that necklace was my money. Money I earned from hustling and networking. You just type at home. What do you know about the pressures of business out there?" Jason had yelled that night. From that day on, Sarah stopped fighting. She shut down her heart. She continued to work like a robot, finishing one design after another for Jason's firm simply because architecture was her only escape to stay sane. She never knew that her escapist work was what would ultimately catch the attention of a man like Charles Sterling. Sarah's daydream shattered as the car slowed down and turned into the grand entrance of a towering luxury apartment building that pierced the city skyline. "We're here," Charles's voice brought her back to the present. A present that was about to become the turning point of her life. The high-speed elevator took only moments to whisk them to the 40th floor. The doors opened to reveal an elegant hallway with thick carpeting. Charles led the way, with Sarah following behind, her steps still a bit hesitant. He stopped in front of a set of dark mahogany double doors, tapped an access card, and pushed them open. "Please, come in," he said. Sarah stepped inside and gasped. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling glass windows offering an unobstructed panoramic view of Chicago. Modern minimalist furniture with monochrome accents filled a space that was probably as large as Barbara's entire house. The company provides this for its executive directors. Since the head designer position is currently vacant, this place is yours for as long as you work for me, Charles explained, as he walked to the kitchen island and poured water into 2 crystal glasses. Sarah placed her shabby plastic bag on a leather sofa that looked incredibly expensive, feeling that such an ugly object didn't belong there. She walked to the window, staring down at the streets that looked like tiny ant trails below. The heavy burden that had been crushing her shoulders suddenly felt lifted. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah turned around. "Are you sure? I don't even have a decent change of clothes besides what's in that bag. I don't have a printed portfolio. I feel like a beggar who's walked into a palace." Charles approached her, handing her a glass of water. He then placed a leather folder containing several documents on the glass coffee table nearby. "Clothes can be bought, appearances can be changed, but what's inside your head, the way you see space and structure that can't be bought in any mall," he said, his gaze intense yet calming. "I've studied your work, Sarah. You have an extraordinary intuition. You were just trapped in the wrong ecosystem." He pointed to the folder. "That's your exclusive employment contract. Read it carefully. Your salary, benefits, insurance, it's all in there. But I ask for one thing." Sarah looked at him, waiting. "I don't just want your designs. I want your complete focus on this company. I want your work here to be a knockout blow that will destroy the fake empire your ex-husband built. I know every project he's targeting, and I want our firm to win them all. Agreed?" Sarah understood his meaning. This wasn't just business. Charles was giving her a weapon, a stage, so she could get her revenge in the most elegant way possible, through undeniable success. Without reading the fine print, because she knew any number would be infinitely better than the $0 she had received for years, Sarah picked up the expensive pen from the table. "I won't disappoint you, Mr. Sterling," she said firmly. She signed her name on the dotted line, a signature that was her declaration of war. "Good. The HR team will process this tomorrow morning. You start at the office the day after," Charles said, taking the folder and offering a small, genuine smile for the first time that day. "Now, get cleaned up. Rest. There's a signing bonus advance in that envelope for your immediate needs." "I'll see myself out." Charles left the penthouse, leaving Sarah alone in the comfortable silence. She stared at the closed door for a long time. Slowly, she walked to the master bathroom, which was the size of her old bedroom. A large marble bathtub sat in the center of the room. She turned on the shower, letting the warm water cascade over her body, drenching the shabby clothes she still wore. And under that warm stream, for the first time in years, Sarah let out a raw, guttural cry. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of release. Her tears flowed freely, washing away all the pain, Barbara's insults, Jason's betrayal, and her own despair. She let the water cleanse away every last remnant of humiliation that clung to her skin. Today, the weak, submissive Sarah had died. The morning greeted Chicago with a golden orange glow. Sarah woke up in a king-size bed with cool silk sheets. Her body felt light, as if a poison that had been coursing through her veins for years had been completely purged. She reached for the brown envelope Charles had left last night. When she opened it, her eyes widened at its contents. A private debit card with her name printed on it. With it was a slip of paper containing the PIN and an initial balance that made her count the zeros twice. A 6-figure advance on her signing bonus. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah had full control over the fruits of her own labor. At 10 a.m., Sarah went down to the lobby and asked the concierge to call a taxi to one of the most exclusive shopping districts on Michigan Avenue. Today, she had only one agenda: to erase every trace of the downtrodden housewife from her being, leaving nothing behind. Her first destination was a high-end salon. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you?" The salon receptionist greeted her warmly, though her eyes briefly flickered over Sarah's oversized, cheap-looking clothes. "I want a complete hair treatment, cut, and color." "Something natural but elegant," Sarah said, with a calm tone she was just discovering she possessed. "And a full facial and body spa treatment as well." For the next 4 hours, Sarah was pampered like a queen. Her long, dull hair, which she used to tie back haphazardly, was cut into long layers that framed her face, giving her a look that was both sharp and graceful. The color was changed to a deep mahogany brown that perfectly complemented her features. Her skin, worn down by lack of sleep and stress, was scrubbed and polished until it glowed. When she sat in front of the makeup mirror surrounded by bright lights, Sarah stared at her reflection, breathless. Who was this beautiful woman looking back at her? Her eyes were sharp, her jaw held high with pride. This was Sarah, the lead designer, not Sarah, the oppressed daughter-in-law. After leaving the salon, Sarah walked confidently into a row of renowned designer boutiques. She remembered Nicole's tacky style, trying too hard to look sexy. Sarah chose a different path. She aimed for elegance. She bought several sharply tailored blazer sets, wide-leg trousers made of flowing fabric that looked professional, several silk blouses, and elegant dresses with simple cuts that radiated luxury through their materials. She also purchased several pairs of comfortable yet stylish high heels from well-known brands, a large leather tote bag to carry her laptop and design documents, and a set of skincare and perfume with a scent of musk and jasmine that exuded the aura of an independent woman. As Sarah walked out of the mall in the late afternoon, stepping through the automatic glass doors while two attendants carried her shopping bags to a VIP taxi, she looked up at the cloudy Chicago sky. She took out her cheap, old phone, which had been turned off since yesterday. When she turned it on, dozens of messages and missed calls flooded in. Most were from Jason. Jason's message, yesterday, 3:30 p.m. Sarah, where are you? Don't cause trouble. Come home and apologize to Mom. Jason's message, yesterday, 7 p.m. Sarah, don't be childish. Come home now. I need the design revisions for the Donovan client first thing in the morning. Jason's message, today, 9 a.m. Sarah, are you insane? Pick up the phone. The client is furious, asking about the roof's structural details. I don't understand the calculations. Get back here right now. Sarah read the messages with a faint, wry smile. The fear that used to grip her whenever she read Jason's threats had vanished. In its place was a deep sense of satisfaction, imagining Jason panicking and sweating in front of a client because he couldn't explain a design he had stolen. Without replying, Sarah blocked Jason's number, Barbara's number, and deleted their contacts. She then tossed the cheap phone into a donation bin near the mall exit, intending to buy the latest smartphone tomorrow. She had thrown her past into the garbage. Starting tomorrow, when she walked into Charles Sterling's corporate headquarters, Jason and his family would begin to experience a hell of their own making. Jason's destruction was imminent, and Sarah was going to be the one to orchestrate it. Cold sweat, the size of corn kernels, beaded on Jason's forehead. His expensive shirt, perfectly ironed this morning, now felt sticky against his back. The centrally air-conditioned meeting room suddenly felt like a furnace. Across the oval glass table sat Mr. Donovan, a real estate tycoon known for his ruthless business practices. Mr. Donovan stared at the blueprint on the table, his brow deeply furrowed. He tapped his gold pen on the paper, creating a rhythmic sound that, to Jason's ears, sounded like a ticking time bomb. Jason, Mr. Donovan's deep voice broke the suffocating silence. I paid your firm a premium price because of your portfolio on previous projects. That Aspen resort design was extraordinary. But this, Mr. Donovan held up the design for a 3-story mall that Jason had presented. This is garbage. Jason swallowed hard, his voice caught in his throat. Sir, what do you mean? Aesthetically, it follows the modern minimalist trend. Aesthetics! My foot! Mr. Donovan roared, slamming his hand on the table, causing the coffee cups to rattle. Look at the load calculation for this skylight roof. You've placed a main support pillar in a blind spot that will obstruct the main escalator. If we build this, the structure could collapse in less than 5 years. And the air circulation? Do you think my mall shoppers are mole rats who don't need oxygen? Jason was flustered. He pulled the paper closer, his eyes darting wildly over the complex numbers and lines that he didn't understand at all. In the past, if a technical question came up, he would just glance at Sarah, who would be sitting quietly in a corner, and she would take over the presentation with a sweet smile and a logical explanation that would instantly silence any client. But now, that corner chair was empty. Give me 2 days, Mr. Donovan. My team and I will revise it completely. There will be no revisions." Mr. Donovan cut him off sharply. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a gesture full of anger. "Our contract is terminated, and don't expect a single cent of the down payment. You've just wasted my time. I will never recommend your firm to any of my business associates." The stern old man walked out of the room, slamming the door hard behind him. Jason slumped in his chair, rubbing his face roughly. The meeting room now felt like a tomb. He grabbed his phone from his pocket, his hands shaking violently as he searched for Sarah in his contacts. The first call went to voicemail. The second, the number was no longer in service. The third, fourth, fifth, the result was the same. Sarah had blocked him completely. "Damn it, bastard." Jason screamed in frustration, sweeping all the documents and miniature models off the table, sending them scattering across the floor. The sound of shattering acrylic echoed in the empty room. For the first time in 3 years, Jason was faced with the bitter reality he had always denied. He was nothing without his ex-wife's brain and hard work. He was just an empty shell who was good at talking. And now, without Sarah, that shell was beginning to crack and shatter into pieces. While Jason faced ruin at his office, the atmosphere at his luxurious home was no less tense. In the classic-style living room filled with ornate, carved furniture, Barbara sat restlessly, fanning her face with a magazine, even though the air conditioning was on full blast. Across from her sat 3 middle-aged women dressed in flashy clothes and gaudy gold jewelry. They were Barbara's high-stakes bridge club. "So, what's the story, Barbara?" asked Mrs. Miller, a woman with a high bun, who looked at Barbara with a condescending gaze. "It's already past the 20th. This month's pot was Susan's turn, but your payment hasn't come through yet. $20,000 isn't small change for us." Barbara forced a smile, trying to hide her panic behind her thick makeup. "Oh, Mita, Susan, be a little patient. My son Jason is in the middle of a massive billion-dollar project tender, so his cash is all tied up in the initial investment. I'll transfer it this afternoon or tomorrow morning for sure. I'll even add some interest for our next ladies' lunch." "Oh, really?" Susan chimed in sarcastically, crossing her legs. "I heard there was a huge fight at this house yesterday. Someone was thrown out onto the street in broad daylight. Could it be that your son's business is failing because he's cursed for what he did to his wife?" Barbara's face turned beet red with shame and anger. Her secret was apparently common knowledge in the wealthy neighborhood. "How dare you say that? That barren woman deserved to be kicked out. She was just a parasite living off my son. You just wait. Soon, Jason will bring home a new wife, who is much classier." The 3 women just exchanged scornful glances, then got up to leave without touching the tea that had been served, leaving behind a threat that if the money wasn't there by tomorrow, Barbara's name would be removed, and she would be humiliated in the community's WhatsApp group. After they left, Barbara slammed the magazine onto the table. "Insolent women, daring to look down on my family." Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps came down the stairs. Nicole appeared with a pout, wearing a thin silk nightgown. She threw a credit card onto the table in front of Barbara. "Auntie, what is this?" "I was about to buy a handbag at my favorite boutique, and the card was declined. It was so humiliating. My personal shopper even called me," Nicole whined, both spoiled and annoyed. "Oh, Nicole, you're buying another bag? You just bought shoes yesterday," Barbara scolded, her head starting to throb. "Maybe the limit is maxed out. Wait for Jason to come home. He'll handle it." The front door burst open violently. Jason strode in, his face as crumpled as his clothes. The man's eyes were bloodshot, radiating a palpable hostility. "Jason, honey, what is wrong with—" "Shut up!" Jason bellowed, his voice thundering through the house, cutting off Nicole's whining instantly. Barbara and Nicole jumped in shock. Jason had never raised his voice like that before. The man threw his briefcase to the floor and stared straight at his mother and his mistress, breathing heavily. "Do you know what just happened? My main project was canceled. The client terminated the contract because my design was flatly rejected. The company is now facing a penalty of hundreds of thousands of dollars for breach of contract." Jason ran a hand through his hair, nearly pulling it out. "What? How could that happen, son?" Barbara stammered, her arrogant demeanor melting away. You always win the big projects. Because Sarah was always the one doing all the work. Jason gestured wildly towards the door in frustration. And you, with your brilliant idea, kicked that woman out yesterday. Now who's going to create the designs? You, or this useless woman? Jason pointed a sharp finger at Nicole, making her shrink back in fear. Why are you blaming me, honey? Nicole retorted, not wanting to take the blame. You're the one who said you wanted to divorce your backwater wife, because I thought I could run the firm without her. It turns out all the client access, all the technical calculations are in her head. Now my company is on the brink of collapse, our savings are nearly gone, and the bills are piling up. Hearing the words savings are gone, Barbara's knees went weak. She collapsed onto the sofa. The image of luxury handbags, diamond bridge clubs, and her high social status slowly crumbled before her eyes. The arrogance she had celebrated yesterday by casting out Sarah had now come back to choke her. In stark contrast to the hellfire-consuming Jason's family, in a futuristic skyscraper in the heart of Chicago, an aura of victory was being built. The executive boardroom, on the 45th floor of Charles Sterling's company, was filled with 12 top executives, senior architects, and project managers. The long, solid oak table in the center of the room faced a giant interactive screen. The door opened, and all eyes turned. Sarah walked in. Gone was the submissive, shabbily dressed woman who always looked down. The woman walking to the front of the room exuded an undeniable authority. She wore an asymmetrical navy blazer with a precise cut, straight-leg trousers, and black stiletto heels that made a rhythmic, confident clicking sound with every step. Her mahogany brown hair was left to fall elegantly. Her gaze was sharp, but her smile was warm and professional. Charles, sitting in the main chair at the head of the table, looked at Sarah with deep satisfaction. His business instincts were never wrong. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sarah's voice was clear and articulate, echoing perfectly in the well-designed acoustic space. I am Sarah, your new head of design. Today, I will be presenting the redesigned concept for the Eco-Lux Mall and Residences mega project that we will be building in the heart of the city. Sarah touched the tablet in her hand. The giant screen behind her lit up, displaying a 3D visualization of an architectural masterpiece that drew silent gasps of admiration from several directors. It wasn't just a building, it was an ecosystem. Sarah had combined a smart glass facade that could adjust to the intensity of sunlight with an organic, curved structure that mimicked the shape of terraced landscapes. My primary focus is not just luxury, but sustainability, Sarah began to explain, walking slowly around the room, making eye contact with each member of her audience. I have eliminated the conventional concrete block design. As you can see in this vertical structure, I've used a passive cross-ventilation system. Natural air circulation will reduce commercial air conditioning usage by up to 40% annually. The main structural load is distributed through an exterior steel diagrid frame, providing a pillar-less space in the main atrium, which will maximize our commercial lease value to its highest potential. Mr. Herman, the director of operations, known for being skeptical and harsh in his critiques, raised his hand. What about the city's groundwater absorption regulations? Considering our land area will be almost entirely covered by commercial construction, Sarah smiled. She had anticipated that question. She swiped on her tablet, bringing up a diagram of the subterranean layers. Right under this open plaza area, Mr. Herman, I've designed a zero-runoff modular retention tank. All rainwater from the canopy roofs won't flow into the city's sewers, but will be filtered and channeled into an integrated recycling system to water the vertical hanging gardens on all residential floors. We will not only comply with government regulations, we will become the pioneer of green building standards in this country. There was a moment of silence. Mr. Herman stared intently at the blueprint, then slowly nodded his head with a satisfied smile. Brilliant. The structural calculations and the vision are exceptionally well developed. Applause, led by Charles, began to fill the room. Sarah bowed her head slightly, savoring the moment of recognition that had been stolen from her for 3 years. Her heart soared, warmed by a sense of relief and pride. She was finally back on the stage that was rightfully hers. After the meeting ended and the room gradually emptied, Charles walked over to Sarah, who was tidying up her documents. He leaned one hand on the edge of the conference table, looking at her intently. "You exceeded my expectations, Sarah. And that is a very rare occurrence." Charles praised her sincerely, his deep voice sounding softer than usual. Sarah met his gaze. There was a strange, pleasant flutter in her chest at being praised directly by him. "It's thanks to you, sir. You were the one who opened the door. I just walked through it." "No," Charles shook his head slowly. "The door is meaningless if the person walking through has no courage. You're a great fighter. By the way, this afternoon I need to do a site visit at our old mall in the South Side that's going to be completely renovated. I want you to come with me. I need your eyes on the ground to see the potential for gutting the existing layout." "Of course, sir. I'm ready." "Good. Pack up. We leave in 30 minutes, Charles said. As he turned to leave, he glanced back slightly. "Your presentation today was very impressive." Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment, but she quickly hid her smile with a professional nod. She had no idea that this site visit would bring her face to face with her past in the most epic way. On the other side of the city, in one of the most luxurious, albeit aging, shopping malls frequented by the upper-class socialites, Barbara and Nicole were walking with frustrated steps. They had just come out of an Italian handbag boutique. Instead of carrying shopping bags with golden logos, their faces were contorted with embarrassment. Jason's last remaining credit card had just been declined at the register for being maxed out. "Unbelievable. It can't even handle a $10,000 charge," Nicole grumbled, stomping her foot in her flashy platform heels. "Auntie, what is going on with Jason? He claims to be a successful businessman. Can't he even spoil his future wife anymore?" Barbara pinched Nicole's arm sharply, making the younger woman yelp. "Watch your mouth, Nicole. We're in a public place. I'm stressed out too. If it weren't for that Sarah suddenly leaving and abandoning her work, Jason wouldn't be in this mess." "Well, you're the one who threw her out like a mad woman yesterday," Nicole retorted fiercely. They continued walking through the cool mall corridors, bickering and blaming each other like two criminals fighting over the last of their loot. Their steps halted at the main atrium, which was cordoned off with construction safety tape. A large section of it was being measured for a massive renovation. In the middle of the atrium stood a group of people in high-end project uniforms. There was a foreman, several engineers holding large rolls of paper, and Barbara stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes narrowed, trying to focus. Her heart felt like it skipped a beat. Nicole, who had bumped into her back, followed her gaze. Nicole's mouth fell slightly open. In the center of the group of professional men stood a woman who was the center of attention. She wore an elegant pantsuit and held a black tablet. A white, hard hat sat perfectly on her head, covering her shimmering brown hair. She was pointing at a main pillar while giving instructions that were listened to with rapt attention by the men around her. Next to her stood a tall, handsome man in a long-sleeved shirt rolled up to his elbows. The same man who had picked Sarah up in the luxury car the other day. "Auntie. That can't be that homeless woman, can it?" Nicole pointed with a trembling finger, her eyes wide as she stared at Sarah's 180-degree transformation. Barbara rubbed her eyes. She refused to believe it. It was impossible that the parasite she had thrown out of her house with only a plastic bag could be standing in a luxury mall today, wearing clothes that probably cost more than a monthly payment on Jason's car, ordering people around like a big boss. Envy, jealousy, and wounded pride exploded in Barbara's chest. Her arrogance refused to accept the reality that Sarah could be better off without her son. Her petty mind immediately jumped to one foolish conclusion. "My suspicions were right," Barbara snarled, her eyes glaring. "That snake. Yesterday she was crying and begging, and today she's showing off with her rich sugar daddy. Look at her, pretending to be a boss. She's probably just a mistress that he's buying a mall for." Without a second thought for her own dignity, blinded by a pride that had overtaken her common sense, Barbara pushed past the yellow and black safety tape. She strode quickly, consumed by rage, toward the center of the atrium, with Nicole trailing behind her with a sneer. "Hey, you cheap whore!" Barbara's shrill scream echoed loudly in the empty atrium, bouncing off the glass walls, causing several shoppers on the upper floors to look down. Sarah, who was in the middle of explaining a ventilation structure, fell silent. She turned, and the professional expression on her face didn't change at all, even as her eyes registered the sight of her former mother-in-law and her husband's mistress marching towards her like angry bulls. Charles, standing next to Sarah, frowned. A dominant and intimidating aura immediately radiated from him. The engineers and foremen instinctively took a step back, making way for the show that was just about to begin. "Well, look at you." Barbara stopped about 2 meters in front of Sarah, her hands on her hips, pointing a finger adorned with fake gold rings at Sarah's face. The old woman's breath was ragged with anger. "Yesterday you were crying and begging not to be kicked out. Today you're all dolled up and parading around with another man. You ungrateful tramp. No wonder you never wanted to take care of my son in the house. You were out selling yourself." Nicole, standing behind Barbara, crossed her arms and smirked. "So true, Auntie. You can tell by the way she acts, trying so hard to be elegant. It's all just from leeching off someone else's wallet." Sarah stood calmly, her posture perfectly straight. She didn't even blink or show a hint of intimidation. In the past, Barbara's yelling would have made her tremble and cower. Now, her voice sounded like the yapping of a small, helpless dog. "Are you finished, Mrs. Miller?" Sarah's voice was flat, cold, and deadly. She folded her arms across her chest, returning her mother-in-law's glare with a look of condescension, the same look Barbara used to give her. Barbara was taken aback by Sarah's reaction. She had expected Sarah to cry or be ashamed of being publicly humiliated. "How dare you talk back to me? You need to remember your place. You're just a beggar kicked out of Jason's house." Before Sarah could respond, Charles stepped forward. His tall, imposing figure completely blocked Barbara's view of Sarah. The atmosphere in the atrium suddenly felt like it had been frozen by Charles's presence. "Who gave you permission to cross the boundary of this construction area?" Charles's voice was low, but it resonated with an authority that could make anyone's courage wither. Barbara looked up, trembling slightly at the man before her. I just wanted to let you know, sir, you shouldn't be fooled by this woman. She's my former daughter-in-law. A lazy, stupid woman. All she knows is how to live off others. Those nice clothes are just to cover up her true nature as a homewrecker." Charles looked Barbara up and down with a very real expression of disgust, as if he were looking at dirt on his expensive shoes. He let out a short, dry, dismissive laugh. "You call her a stupid woman who lives off others?" Charles shook his head slowly, then turned to one of his assistants standing nearby. "Donnie, please inform this woman who owns the company that is renovating this mall." The well-dressed assistant named Donnie stepped forward. "This company belongs to Mr. Charles Sterling, ma'am. He is the CEO of the largest property development group in the country. And the woman you just insulted is Miss Sarah, our head of design. She is in control of all our multi-billion-dollar mega projects." Barbara's face went deathly pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Nicole, who had been so smug, now shrank back and hid behind Barbara's back. "Head of design?" Barbara whispered hoarsely, as if the words made no sense to her. Charles took over the conversation again, his tone now as sharp as a scalpel. "Yes, Sarah is the genius behind all the fake success that your pathetic son has been claiming. And just so you know, ma'am, today my company just terminated a potential partnership with Jason's firm. Why? Because without Sarah, your son doesn't even know the difference between a support beam and a clothesline." Barbara's eyes widened in horror. Charles's words were exactly the same as Jason's frustrated screams from last night. Now the puzzle was solved. Charles wasn't finished stripping away the family's facade. He took another step closer, making Barbara retreat in fear. "I hear your son is now being chased by clients because he failed to present a design. I also hear your credit cards have been blocked by the bank." "How ironic," Charles smiled cynically, staring sharply into Barbara's eyes, which were now welling up with tears of panic. "You threw out the only person who was feeding your family for the last 3 years. You didn't get rid of a parasite. You threw away a diamond to keep a pile of trash." Charles glanced briefly at Nicole, making the young woman look down in shame, her face turning crimson. "Security," Charles called out in a loud voice. Two security guards in black uniforms ran over. Escort these two unauthorized individuals out of my project area. If they refuse, drag them to the street. Charles's command was merciless. But, sir, Barbara tried to defend herself, her body shaking violently as she realized the full extent of her ruin. Let's go, ma'am. Please exit the area, one of the security guards said, taking Barbara's and Nicole's arms firmly. Barbara, who was usually loud and defiant, was now silent. She was dragged out past the crowd of onlookers and project workers who stared at her with mocking expressions. Her pride was shattered on the floor of that mall. Nicole kept trying to hide her face with her handbag, crying in shame at being a public spectacle. Sarah stood her ground, watching the two parasitic figures in her life being removed from her presence. There was no pity in her heart, only a cold satisfaction. The heavy weight in her chest had completely evaporated. Charles turned back to Sarah, his expression softening again. "Are you okay?" Sarah took a deep breath and smiled, a truly genuine smile that radiated the freedom of her soul. "I have never felt better in my entire life, Mr. Sterling. Now, let's continue our discussion about this atrium pillar." Sarah's revenge was just getting started, and she knew that karma was about to hit Jason with a much more fatal blow in a court of law. The air in the corporate law firm's conference room, part of the Sterling Group, was cold and sterile. Around a black marble table sat three senior lawyers with serious expressions. Thick files were spread out before them. At the head of the table, Sarah sat with her back straight, observing a projector screen that displayed lines of code and property details from her old design files. "The digital footprint never lies, Miss Sarah," said Mr. Anwar, the lead counsel, personally appointed by Charles. He pointed to the screen with a laser pointer. "Our IT forensics team has recovered all the backup data from the old servers of Jason's company. Of the 120 projects claimed by his architectural firm over the past 3 years, 115 of them have metadata that traces back to the IP address of your personal laptop, complete with creation logs that often occurred after 2 a.m. Sarah nodded slowly. The bitter memories of fighting off sleep and back pain in Jason's cramped home office flashed before her eyes. But this time, there were no tears. All that remained was a powerful drive to take back what was rightfully hers. "Is this evidence enough to put him in jail, Mr. Anwar?" Sarah asked calmly, her eyes filled with resolve. "More than enough," Mr. Anwar smiled, the smile of a predator ready to pounce. "We are not only suing him in civil court for $20 million in damages for intellectual property theft, but we are also charging him with criminal corporate fraud. Jason used someone else's work to win public and private tenders. This is a major crime in the creative industry." In the corner of the room, Charles, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, finally spoke. "Send the summons today. Make sure it's delivered to his mother's address, not his office. Let that old woman see for herself the destruction her precious son has brought upon them." 3 hours later, a court courier on a motorcycle pulled up in front of the locked iron gate of Barbara's house. The weather was scorching, just like the day Sarah had been kicked out. Barbara, who was in a foul mood because her air conditioning had just died and the repairman refused to come due to unpaid bills, trudged to open the gate. Her face was etched with annoyance as she saw the man in a court uniform holding out a thick brown envelope with an official stamp. "What is this now? Another bill? My son is a director. Every bill, no matter how small, gets paid. Don't just send random mail here," Barbara grumbled as she snatched the envelope, her wrinkled hand hastily signing the receipt. "It's a court summons, ma'am. You should read it," the courier replied flatly before revving his engine and driving away. Barbara snorted. As she walked back to the porch, she tore open the envelope and pulled out its contents. Her aging eyes squinted, reading the lines of text under the official letterhead of the circuit court. Suddenly, the old woman's breath caught. Her heart pounded violently, as if it had been struck by a sledgehammer. The words on the page seemed to leap out and strangle her. "Lawsuit for violation of intellectual property rights. Plaintiff, Sarah. Defendant, Jason. Demand for damages, $20 million, $20 million, along with seizure of assets." The papers slipped from Barbara's hand, fluttering to the hot stone porch. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the scorching granite, her vision blurring. 20 million, she stammered, her lips trembling. A hysterical scream erupted from her mouth, shattering the silence of the neighborhood. Jason! Jason, get home now! That crazy woman is going to make us destitute! News of the $20 million lawsuit spread faster than wildfire. Within 24 hours, vendors who worked with Jason's firm unilaterally terminated their contracts. Clients withdrew their down payments. The company's bank accounts were frozen as a legal precaution. Jason was utterly destroyed. The man who had always presented himself as a dapper professional with expensive suits and designer watches now looked like a madman. His eyes were sunken and dark, his hair was a mess, and the smell of cheap alcohol wafted from his breath. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming panic. He knew he couldn't win the lawsuit. The evidence detailed in the copy of the complaint was too precise, too real. His only way out was to beg for mercy from the one person who had once loved him so sincerely. That afternoon, Jason stormed into the lobby of the Sterling Group's building. He was stopped by security, but he struggled, screaming Sarah's name, creating a spectacle for the elite employees passing by. "Sarah, please, let me see you, just for a minute," Jason yelled, his voice hoarse. Veins bulged on his neck as two security guards pinned his arms. The VIP elevator doors opened. Sarah stepped out. She paused for a moment, taking in the chaos in the lobby. Her appearance today was stunning, in a dark maroon suit that radiated authority. She looked at Jason. The man she had once respected and served like a king now looked so pathetic, writhing on the lobby floor like a beggar caught stealing. Sarah raised her hand, signaling to the security guards. "Let him go. Let him speak. I'll give him 2 minutes." As soon as the guards released their grip, Jason scrambled forward. Ignoring the dozens of disgusted stares, he threw himself at Sarah's feet, kneeling and clasping his hands together. "Sarah, I'm begging you," Jason cried, tears streaming down his grimy cheeks. "Drop the lawsuit, please. I'm going crazy. My company is ruined. The clients are all gone. If I have to pay 20 million, I'll have to sell my mom's house, sell everything, and I'll still be in debt." Sarah didn't move. She looked down at the top of her ex-husband's head with a gaze so cold it could freeze blood. "And what does that have to do with me, Jason?" she asked slowly, her voice calm but razor-sharp. Jason looked up, trying to grab her hand, but Sarah quickly pulled it away as if his touch was a disease. "Sarah, we loved each other once. We were married for 3 years. Have you forgotten all of that?" Jason tried his old manipulative tactics, his voice pleading in a way that used to make Sarah give in. "I made a mistake, Sarah. I was blind. It was Nicole. She seduced me. She's the one who made me distant from you. I promise, I'll get rid of her. Let's get back together. Come back to my firm. We can rebuild it from scratch. I promise I'll appreciate you this time." Sarah laughed. A very quiet, dry laugh, devoid of any warmth. It made the hair on Jason's neck stand on end. "Love, you say?" Sarah leaned down slightly, looking directly into Jason's desperate eyes. "What kind of love lets a husband snore peacefully while his wife is killing herself from exhaustion to meet your client's deadlines? What kind of love stays silent while his mother calls his wife barren and drags her out of the house like a stray dog?" Jason swallowed, his lips trembling, unable to answer. "You never loved me, Jason. You only loved the convenience I provided." Sarah hissed, making sure every syllable burned into his brain. "You didn't make a mistake. You were greedy. And now, karma is here to collect its debt. But Sarah, my mom, have pity on my mom. She's old." "Don't take her house," Jason begged, his voice laced with desperation. "When your mother threw me out in the blistering sun with nothing but the clothes on my back, did she think about pity?" Sarah straightened up, her expression as unyielding as a rock. "Your 2 minutes are up. You'd better get the best lawyer you can find, Jason, because I won't stop until you have lost everything, just like you took everything from me." Sarah turned gracefully, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. "Get him out of here." As he was dragged out of the lobby, Jason screamed Sarah's name, mixed with desperate curses. From the second-floor balcony overlooking the lobby, Charles stood watching the entire scene. A proud smile graced his lips. The woman he had chosen was never wrong. That night, Barbara's house felt like a funeral home. None of the chandeliers were lit, only a dim lamp in the living room cast a grim silence. Jason sat on the sofa with a half-empty bottle of cheap liquor in his hand, his eyes staring blankly at the dark television screen. Upstairs, Barbara lay weakly in her bed, her blood pressure having skyrocketed earlier, requiring a doctor's visit. In the midst of this gloom, the guest room door opened quietly. Nicole tiptoed out. She was wearing jeans, a leather jacket, and carrying a large, stuffed travel bag. Her eyes darted nervously towards the living room, making sure Jason wasn't watching. For Nicole, Jason was nothing more than an ATM. When the machine broke and started spitting out bills instead of cash, there was no reason for her to stay. She had heard about the multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Staying in this house meant sharing in the poverty and shame. And Nicole, with her parasitic nature, preferred to find a new, healthier host. On tiptoe, Nicole made her way to Jason's home office. She knew he kept a small safe behind a fake painting on the wall. While Jason was drunk, Nicole had taken the spare key from his pants pocket. Her hands moved quickly and deftly. Click! The safe door opened. Nicole's eyes lit up at the contents. There were several stacks of $100 bills, totaling maybe $20,000, the last of the company's operating cash that Jason had withdrawn before the accounts were frozen. There were also 2 genuine Rolex watches and, of course, the deed to Barbara's house. Nicole was greedy, but not stupid. She left the deed, knowing that stealing such a valuable document would only get the police on her tail. She quickly grabbed all the cash and the 2 luxury watches, stuffing them into her travel bag. This was more than enough to fund her escape to another city and find a new rich target. Nicole closed the safe silently, put the painting back, and walked quickly to the front door. But as she reached for the handle, a hoarse voice stopped her. "Where do you think you're going?" With a big bag in the middle of the night. Nicole froze. Jason was standing at the edge of the living room, his steps unsteady, but his eyes were fixed sharply on the travel bag she was holding. Nicole quickly changed her expression, putting on a look of innocent hurt. I'm going back to my parents' house, Jason. I can't stand it here anymore. Your mother has been blaming me for everything all day. She says I'm bad luck." Jason frowned, setting his bottle down on the table. "Leaving? You're leaving me now? When I'm at my lowest?" "You said you loved me, Nicole." "Love doesn't pay the bills, Jason," Nicole snapped, dropping her sweet act, knowing she had to get out quickly. "Besides, this is all your fault. Why did you never tell me that all your brilliant designs were the work of your wife? If I had known you were just a parasite riding on her coattails, I never would have wasted my time with you." Jason's eyes widened. Nicole's words felt like a slap to his remaining sanity. "So you only wanted my money? Well, duh. Get a clue, Jason. You're not smart. You just got lucky with a genius wife. Now she's wised up and destroyed you. I'm not going down with this sinking ship. Bye." Nicole yanked the front door open and ran out to an Uber that she had already called. "Nicole, wait! What's in that bag?" Jason tried to chase her, but he tripped on the rug and fell flat on his face. By the time he managed to get up and run outside, the car was already speeding away into the night. A sudden panic seized him. Jason ran back into the house and into his office. He tore the painting off the wall and forced the safe open. Empty. All of his remaining cash and his valuable watches were gone. Jason let out a primal scream. The hysterical cry of a man who had now truly lost everything. His wife, his career, his pride, his money, and his mistress all gone. He collapsed on the floor of his office, punching the marble until his knuckles bled, lamenting the foolishness he had wrought with his own hands. 2 months passed quickly. The courtroom was packed. The case had drawn significant attention from the media and the national architectural community. The story of a husband who stole his wife's intellectual property for years to build a fake business empire became a hot topic on every platform. On the plaintiff's side, Sarah sat calmly. She wore a white silk shirt under a sharply tailored black blazer. Her makeup was natural, but projected an aura of dominance. Beside her, Mr. Anwar neatly arranged a stack of evidence. In the front row of the public seating, Charles sat with his legs crossed, watching the proceedings with the intimidating gaze of an eagle watching its prey. Across the room, at the defendant's table, the scene was a stark contrast. Jason looked like he had aged 10 years. His face was pale and gaunt, his cheekbones jutted out, and the suit he wore hung loosely on his stress-shrunken frame. His lawyer, a portly, bespectacled man named Mr. Gondo, kept wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. The chief judge banged the gavel. The hearing for the case of intellectual property rights violation and tortious interference, docket number 445, PDTG, is now in session. The plaintiff may present their expert witness or additional evidence. Mr. Anwar stood, adjusting his glasses. Thank you, Your Honor. We would like to present the findings of an independent third-party digital forensic audit. Mr. Anwar signaled his assistant to turn on the projector. The screen displayed a side-by-side comparison of two documents. Your Honor, Mr. Anwar's voice was firm. On the left is a design document registered and claimed by the defendant in hundreds of his portfolios. On the right is the raw data extracted from the personal cloud drive of our client, Miss Sarah. The screen cycled through layers of complex architectural drawings. We have traced the edit history log. It is clear that every structural revision, every addition of a pillar, down to the material load calculations, were all typed and processed from our client's account. The creation times always precede the time the defendant presented the document to his clients, with an average gap of only 4 to 6 hours. Our client worked all night, and the defendant stole her work in the morning. Jason's lawyer, Mr. Gondo, quickly stood up. Objection, Your Honor. My client and the plaintiff were husband and wife at the time. In a marriage, assets and work products are often considered joint property. My client assumed his wife was helping his company voluntarily. Before the judge could respond, Mr. Anwar smiled cynically and stepped forward. A very interesting assumption, Counselor. However, copyright law does not recognize the term voluntary for a work that is commercialized under someone else's name without a legal transfer of rights agreement. Furthermore, your client used it to defraud the public and investors. Mr. Anwar pointed to the screen again. This time it showed a short, silent video. It was CCTV footage from the lobby of Jason's firm a few years ago. Jason was seen shaking hands with a public official, accepting a prestigious architecture award. The defendant not only reaped financial benefits but also took personal credit and awards for work he did not create a single line of. This is structured fraud, Your Honor. The chief judge nodded slowly, jotting something down. Jason, do you have any technical rebuttal to the digital forensic evidence presented by the plaintiff? Jason slowly looked up, his eyes red and empty. He glanced at his lawyer, who motioned for him to deny it. Then he looked at Sarah. She met his gaze without emotion, a wall of ice that no manipulation could penetrate. The air in the courtroom was heavy. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Jason's answer. No, Your Honor? Jason's voice was a hoarse whisper, but it was clearly picked up by the microphone. All of that evidence is true. A murmur erupted from the public seating. Flashes from reporters' cameras at the back of the room went off in a frenzy. Jason's lawyer slapped his own forehead in despair, realizing the case was over. Jason had just waved the white flag in the middle of the battlefield. Order! Order in the court! The judge banged his gavel repeatedly until the room was silent again. With the defendant's confession and the sufficiency of the evidence presented, the court will now recess for deliberation before delivering the final verdict. The tension reached its peak when the three judges re-entered the courtroom after a 30-minute recess. The clock on the wall seemed to tick slower. Sarah took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. This was the finish line of her suffering. The chief judge straightened the stack of documents before him, looked directly at both parties, and began to read the verdict in his heavy, authoritative baritone. Based on the valid evidence, expert testimony, and the confession of the defendant himself, the circuit court has decided as follows. The silence was so thick you could hear the clock tick. 1. To grant the plaintiff's lawsuit in its entirety. A warm feeling spread through Sarah's chest. A weight as heavy as a mountain had just been lifted from her shoulders. 2. The defendant is found guilty. by a preponderance of the evidence, of committing unlawful acts of copyright infringement and theft of intellectual property. 3. The defendant is ordered to pay material and immaterial damages to the plaintiff in the amount of $15 million. $15 million, to be paid in full immediately. Jason squeezed his eyes shut. Tears of despair streamed down his face. That number far exceeded the total value of all his current assets. 4. The judge continued without pause, his voice like the executioner's gavel. If the defendant is unable to pay the aforementioned amount within the deadline of 14 business days, the court orders the seizure of all movable and immovable assets belonging to the defendant, including company assets and the residential property affiliated with the company's cash flow, to be forcibly auctioned. Thud, thud, thud. The gavel struck 3 times, officially closing the proceedings. The courtroom erupted in applause from spectators sympathetic to Sarah, followed by a rush of reporters. Jason collapsed from his chair, kneeling on the courtroom floor, sobbing like a child who had lost his mother. He tore at his hair, muttering incoherently, cursing his own stupidity. His lawyer quickly packed his briefcase and walked away, ignoring his now destroyed client. On the other side of the room, Sarah stood up. A small, elegant smile graced her beautiful face. Mr. Anwar proudly shook her hand. As Sarah turned to leave the courtroom, Charles was already waiting for her near the gate. He cleared a path for her through the crowd of reporters with a simple gesture of his hand. "Congratulations, Sarah. You won the battle," Charles said, his eyes filled with admiration and, for the first time, a very personal tenderness. Sarah looked into Charles's eyes, her own welling up with tears of overwhelming emotion. "It wasn't just my victory, sir. It was our victory. Thank you for lending me your sword. That sword would have been useless if you weren't the one to wield it." Charles offered his arm. "Let's get out of here. There's big work waiting for us at the office, and maybe a celebratory dinner." Sarah smiled broadly, the most genuine smile she had worn in years. She accepted his arm. The two of them walked out of the stuffy courtroom, down the long hall towards the main entrance where the afternoon sun illuminated their faces. Behind them, they could still faintly hear Jason's cries as he mourned his fate on the cold, hard floor. A perfectly fitting end. 14 days passed since the judge's gavel echoed. For Jason and Barbara, those 2 weeks felt like a slow, certain death knell. Not a single bank would grant them a loan. Barbara's bridge club friends blocked her number, and Jason's business contacts turned away as if he were contagious. $15 million was an impossible sum for a man whose accounts had been drained by his own mistress. On the 15th day, the sun beat down relentlessly on the Chicago suburbs. The heat baked the asphalt of the elite housing complex, causing thin wisps of steam to dance in the air. The weather was a perfect replica of the day Sarah had been cast out like a stray animal months ago. 3 black vans from the sheriff's department, accompanied by 2 police cruisers, stopped in front of the iron gate of Barbara's house. The squeal of brakes and the slamming of car doors shattered the neighborhood's quiet, drawing a few housekeepers and neighbors out to watch. A uniformed court officer stepped out, holding a red folder containing the writ of execution. Behind him, several police officers stood guard with stern faces. The officer rang the doorbell repeatedly. No answer. He then signaled to 2 complex security guards to forcibly cut the padlock on the gate with bolt cutters. The loud clang of metal on metal was deafening. The gate swung open, and the group entered the front yard. Inside the house, Barbara was huddled in a corner of the living room sofa, clutching an antique vase left by her late husband. Her face was pale, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and denial. Near the stairs, Jason sat staring blankly at the marble floor, wearing a faded t-shirt and shorts. His gaze was empty, like a soul detached from its body. The front door was pounded on loudly. "Sheriff's Department! We have a court order to execute the seizure of this property and all its contents!" Hearing that voice, Barbara shrieked hysterically. She shot up from the sofa, ran to the front door, and tried to hold it shut with all her might. "No! You can't come in! This is my house! My husband worked for this house! Go away, all of you! Jason, help me hold the door! Jason!" But Jason didn't move. He just looked down at his own trembling hands. His heart was numb, filled with a regret that was now useless. Since the door remained closed, the officers were forced to break it down. The thick oak door burst open, sending Barbara flying backward onto the floor. The lead officer entered, holding out the execution order. Mr. Jason and Mrs. Barbara Miller. As the deadline for payment of damages has passed without any good faith effort, from this moment on, this property is officially seized by the court for auction. You both have exactly 30 minutes to pack personal belongings, limited to clothing. All furniture, jewelry, and electronics are not to be removed from the premises. You're robbers. You were sent by that whore, weren't you? Barbara struggled as two female officers tried to help her up. She spat on the floor, wailed, and cursed. This house is mine. How dare you kick me out of my own palace? Jason, do something, you fool. Fight them. The officer looked at Jason, who was slowly getting to his feet. Mr. Miller, please cooperate so we do not have to use force. Jason swallowed the bitter bile in his throat. He walked unsteadily to his room on the second floor and grabbed an old backpack he used in college. He stuffed in a few shirts, some underwear, and his personal documents. That was it. He looked around his luxurious room, the plush bed, the designer wardrobe, the collection of expensive shoes. None of it was his anymore. He had no right to a single thread of this stolen luxury. When Jason came downstairs, he saw his mother being forcibly dragged out the door by the officers. Barbara was fighting, crying, and screaming. Her hands reached out, trying to grab onto the doorframe, a pillar, anything to keep her from leaving. Mom, it's over. It's no use, Jason mumbled, weakly pulling his mother's arm. He grabbed a black plastic grocery bag from the kitchen, stuffed 3 of his mother's old house dresses into it, and handed it to Barbara's trembling hands. The two of them walked across the lawn, watched by dozens of neighbors who had gathered outside the gate. There was no sympathy on their faces. Most of them were whispering and sneering, remembering how arrogant and snobbish Barbara had always been. As they stepped through the gate, a security guard immediately pulled the iron gate shut with a loud, final clang that echoed in Jason's chest. A large chain and a thick padlock were immediately installed. A big red sign was nailed to the gate. Property seized by order of the circuit court. The sun was directly overhead, burning their skin without mercy. Barbara collapsed onto the hot sidewalk, crying and wailing as she clutched the black plastic bag containing her tattered dresses. Jason stood beside her, wiping a mixture of sweat and tears from his face. The irony was brutally cruel. The curses Barbara had screamed at Sarah were now thrown back in their own faces. Now, they were the ones outside the gate, standing under the scorching sun, on the boiling asphalt, with nothing but a small bag, cast out from the place they once called home. The universe had reversed their fates with terrifying precision. And, from across the street, not a single luxury car would stop to save them. Time moved on swiftly, erasing the traces of the past like waves washing away writing on the sand. 6 months had passed since the seizure of the Grand House. Chicago remained a bustling city, unforgiving to those left behind. That evening, heavy clouds hung in the sky, bringing a refreshing coolness after a day of blistering heat. Sarah sat comfortably in the back of Charles's Mercedes Maybach. She had just returned from an important meeting with city officials regarding the approval of a public facility she had designed. Sarah rested her head against the soft leather seat. Her appearance was now the perfect embodiment of a successful young executive. Charles, sitting beside her, was reading reports on his tablet, but his left hand casually held Sarah's. It was a gesture of intimacy that had developed naturally between them over the past few months. The luxury car crawled through heavy traffic near a gritty, crowded area on the outskirts of the city. A light rain began to fall, streaking the windows. Sarah turned her head, looking out at the wet sidewalk. The scene was a portrait of the harshness of city life. Street vendors ran for cover, while beggars held out their hands, hoping for a bit of mercy from passing drivers. Suddenly, Sarah's eyes fixed on a spot under a damp pedestrian overpass. There sat a frail old woman in ragged clothes of an indeterminate color. She was coughing violently, her chest heaving with effort. In front of her was a rusty biscuit tin. Next to the old woman, a gaunt, skinny man with long, unkempt hair, was scavenging through a pile of trash bags. He wore a faded, torn t-shirt. The man turned to feed a piece of dirty, leftover bread to the old woman. Just as the man's face was illuminated by a newly lit streetlight, Sarah's breath caught. It was Jason, and the old woman coughing her lungs out was Barbara. Jason's face looked much older than his actual age. His cheekbones were sharp, his eyes were sunken, and his expression was vacant. Barbara, who had once been so proud of her bridge club and social status, was now nothing more than a shell of a human being, waiting for death on the edge of a foul-smelling gutter. Charles, sensing the tension in Sarah's hand, turned and followed her gaze. He squinted, recognizing the two pathetic figures on the sidewalk. Charles was silent for a moment, then looked at Sarah gently. "We're about to turn and drive past them, Sarah. If you want me to open the window so they can see who's in this car, or if you want to throw some money at them as a final victory, just say the word. I'll have the driver pull over." Sarah continued to stare at the two figures. Memories of Barbara's yelling, Jason's insults, the slaps, the forced all-nighters, and the hunger she had endured in that house all came flooding back. For a fleeting moment, she felt a strong urge to get out of the car, stand before Jason and Barbara in her designer suit, and laugh at their destruction. She wanted to complete her revenge, but as she watched Jason wipe his mother's wrinkled face with his filthy, grime-covered hand, that urge slowly dissipated. The anger was replaced by a profound, empty sense of relief. Seeing Jason and Barbara reduced to the lowest dregs of human dignity apparently didn't bring her any additional happiness. Sarah realized her true victory wasn't seeing them suffer, but the fact that she no longer cared about their existence. They were no longer part of her life, not even part of her emotions. Sarah took a deep breath, smiled softly, and turned away from the window. She pressed a button on the door panel, and a black privacy screen glided up, completely blocking the view outside. "There's no need, Charles," Sarah said, her voice as calm as a placid lake. "Opening the window would just let the smell of garbage in. Let's just go home. I'm tired." Charles smiled broadly, his gaze filled with infinite respect and admiration. He squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. "A very classy choice. Driver, continue on. We're heading straight to the event." The black Mercedes glided smoothly through the rain-puddled streets, leaving Jason and Barbara behind, swallowed by the darkness of a city that would soon forget them forever. Karma had done its job without Sarah ever having to dirty her hands again. That night, the grand ballroom on the top floor of the Sterling Group's skyscraper was transformed into a lavish celebration. Giant crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow throughout the room. A live orchestra played as the evening gowns of the guests, government officials, ambassadors, and real estate moguls rustled. Tonight was the grand opening of the Eco-Lux Mall and Residences, the first mega project designed entirely by Sarah, completed in record time and with a quality that was beyond belief. Sarah was the undisputed star of the evening. She wore a deep emerald green silk gown that flowed elegantly to the floor. Its open back highlighted her confident, straight posture. Her hair was styled in a modern updo, with a few wisps framing her beautiful face. Every eye was on her, filled with admiration. Several major investors openly tried to poach her for their firms, but Sarah only responded with a diplomatic smile. Toward midnight, as the party began to wind down, Charles approached Sarah, who was sipping champagne near a glass pillar. He looked incredibly dashing in a perfectly fitted Italian tuxedo. "This party is too loud," Charles whispered near her ear, the warmth of his breath making her shiver slightly. "There's a quieter place upstairs. Come with me." Sarah nodded. Charles guided her through the crowd to a private spiral staircase, hidden behind a wood-paneled door. The staircase led them to an open-air rooftop. As the door opened, the cool night breeze of Chicago washed over their faces. From the height of the 50th floor, the city looked like a sea of twinkling stars. The noise of the traffic below was just a faint, distant hum. The atmosphere was intimate and peaceful. Charles walked to the glass barrier, looking out at the city skyline. Sarah followed, standing so close that their shoulders touched. "You know, Sarah," Charles broke the silence, his voice deeper and more resonant than usual. "I used to look at the buildings in this city as just piles of concrete that make money. I never really cared about their artistic value. To me, property was just numbers. Charles turned to look at her intently. The wind played with his hair, making him look more relaxed, yet still commanding. But then I found your portfolio, and when I saw you design in person, when I heard you talk about how sunlight could be managed, how the wind could be invited into a room, you weren't just building buildings. You were giving life to inanimate objects. Charles shifted his position, now fully facing her. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. The look in his eyes tonight was different. There was no longer the professional wall of a CEO. This was the look of a man to a woman. You saved my company from monotony, Charles continued softly. But more than that, your courage to rise from the ashes, your resilience in facing your past without losing your kindness. That changed the way I see life. Charles, Sarah whispered, her throat suddenly dry. Charles took both of her hands, gently taking the champagne glass and placing it on a small table nearby. He held her cold fingers, slowly stroking them with his thumb. I'm not a man who's good with poetic words. Charles took a short breath, looking directly into her eyes with a paralyzing intensity. When I first told you to get in my car that day, my intentions were purely business. I wanted to reclaim a valuable asset. But over time, that valuable asset has become the only thing I want to protect for the rest of my life. Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a dark blue velvet box. He opened it to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring that sparkled brilliantly. It was as simple yet as strong as Sarah's personality. Sarah covered her mouth with her free hand, her eyes welling up with tears. Sarah, Charles called her name, his voice now trembling slightly with overwhelming emotion. Will you be my life partner? Not just as my best architect, but as the woman who will design our future together. There was no hesitation, no more trauma holding her back. Sarah looked into Charles's eyes and found her true home. A place where she was valued, protected, and loved unconditionally. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks. She nodded firmly. Yes, Charles, I will. A wide smile spread across Charles's face. He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit perfectly, and then pulled her into his arms. Under the Chicago night sky, which bore silent witness, Charles kissed the top of her head gently. The embrace was warm, locking away all the suffering of the past and throwing away the key. 1 month after that rooftop declaration of love, a major announcement shocked the national business and architectural worlds. In the main lobby of the same building, hundreds of journalists, colleagues, and business relations gathered. A large banner stretched behind a small stage. The banner no longer featured the Sterling Group's name prominently, but a new, minimalist, and elegant logo, Sarah Architectural Associates. Today was the official launch of Sarah's independent architectural firm, established as a primary subsidiary and exclusive partner of Charles's corporate giant. It was Charles's engagement gift, proof that he didn't want to keep Sarah in his shadow, but wanted to see her fly even higher. Sarah stood at the podium. The flashes of cameras captured her image in a crisp, sharply cut white suit, symbolizing her rebirth. Thank you all for being here today. Sarah began her speech, her voice calm, firm, and authoritative. The establishment of this firm is not just a business achievement for me. It is proof that work born from honesty and hard work will eventually find its own way to the light. Sarah looked out at the audience, finding Charles standing in the front row with the proudest smile a man could wear. She returned his smile for a moment before addressing the reporters again. Many of us, especially women, often feel that our voices must be silenced. Our work is often stolen, belittled, or manipulated by those who feel more powerful. Sarah paused, letting the silence amplify her message. I was once at a point where I felt worthless. I was once thrown out with nothing but a cheap plastic bag. But I stand here today to say, never let anyone dim your light because of the darkness in their hearts. Be the architect of your own life. Build a strong foundation, and don't be afraid to tear down the toxic structures of the past. Thundering applause filled the room. Several female colleagues in the audience wiped away tears, moved by her deeply personal and empowering speech. After her speech, Sarah stepped down from the stage. Charles greeted her with a warm hug and a brief kiss on the cheek, which immediately became the target of camera lenses, officially announcing their status as the industry's newest power couple. Within days of the launch, multi-million-dollar contracts poured onto Sarah's desk. International clients, global developers, everyone was competing for the services of Sarah Architectural Associates. Sarah was no longer working behind a desk. She supervised projects on site, leading hundreds of workers, her voice always heard and respected. She had transformed from a discarded wife into a queen in full control of her own empire. A year passed since Sarah won her case in court. Life had become a symphony that had found its perfect harmony. That morning, the sound of waves washing over white sand was a soothing melody. At a secluded luxury resort on the California coast, the very resort whose design had been stolen by Jason and led to her first meeting with Charles, a simple yet magical wedding ceremony was taking place. There were no thousands of guests, no press, just Charles, Sarah, an officiant, Charles's close family, and a few dear friends. The wedding altar was set up on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, decorated with strands of white orchids and linen fabric that billowed in the sea breeze. Sarah stood at the altar. She wore a simple, elegant, white silk A-line dress that flowed gracefully with her body, free of excessive embellishments. Her makeup was natural, radiating the pure beauty of a woman whose soul was free. Across from her, Charles looked at her with a gaze that made the world around them seem to stand still. He recited his vows with a loud, clear, and steady voice, sealing their sacred promise before God and the universe. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife and everyone cheered, Sarah felt a single warm tear slide down her cheek. Charles wiped it away with his thumb and then kissed her forehead, a long, tender kiss filled with emotion. From this day forward, I promise there will be no more tears of sadness, only happiness. Sarah, I am yours, and you are mine. Thank you, Charles, Sarah whispered, hugging her husband tightly, inhaling the masculine scent that always made her feel safe. That evening, after an intimate dinner, Sarah walked alone, barefoot, along the cool sand. Charles was chatting with a business associate in a pavilion above. Sarah let her white dress be gently kissed by the sea foam. She looked up at the star-studded night sky, listening to the beautiful symphony of nature. In her heart, Sarah replayed the tape of her memories. She remembered that hot day. She remembered the asphalt burning her feet. She remembered the harsh insults, Barbara's sneering face, Jason's condescending gaze, and the small plastic bag in her hand. If that day had never happened, if she had never been kicked out, she might have spent the rest of her life as a withered shadow in that hellish house. The day of her expulsion, which she had thought was the end of the world, turned out to be the gateway to a heaven she had never dared to dream of. The suffering she endured wasn't a punishment, but God's way of clearing her path so the right person could enter and lift her to the top of the world. What are you thinking about? Charles's deep voice came from behind. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Sarah smiled, leaning her head against his broad chest, gazing at the vast ocean before them. I was thinking about a small, white plastic grocery bag, she answered lightly, her laughter like a melody carried on the sea breeze. A grocery bag? Charles furrowed his brow in confusion. Yes. The bag I was carrying when you saved me, Sarah turned in his arms, wrapping her own around his neck, looking at her husband with a heart full of love. I am so grateful I had it that day, because if my hands had been full, clinging to the past, I never would have been able to reach for your hand to welcome my future. Charles smiled warmly, leaned down, and joined their lips in a sweet, deep kiss under the light of the full moon. Sarah's sad story had officially ended, replaced by a new one written in the ink of absolute happiness. Karma had sorted out who deserved to be at the bottom of the abyss of despair and who deserved to be enthroned in a state of peace. And for Sarah, her throne could now never be taken by anyone ever again.